Your previous solo album was released in 2008.
Right.
When did the idea for a new solo album came?
About the day I finished the first one.
Yeah, really? Was that fast?
Well, I always knew that once I started the solo kind of career, that it was something that would become a constant. It wasn't just like a one-off thing. And so I knew there would be a follow-up. And I wanted to do something even more grand, even on a bigger scale than the first one. I started writing the music about 18 months ago, so it took a long time. But I was touring with Porcupine Tree at the same time, so I was kind of grabbing time when I could to work on it. And I didn't set out to make such a long album either. It started off as just a regular album, but I've got enough material that this album is a double CD. But I've done it so that it's like two albums that are both quite short, relatively short, because I'm a great believer in the idea that there's about a 40-minute attention span that anyone can give to one style of music at any given time. And after that, it just becomes like more of the same. So I've done it so there's two separate 40-minute albums, and I actually discourage anyone to try and listen to them both back to back, you know. So in a way that goes back again to the kind of era that I come from, which is the album era, because the most music you could fit on two sides of a vinyl was about 40 minutes collectively. So that always to me seemed like the right length for an album. And let's face it, attention spans aren't getting longer, they're getting shorter and shorter. So
everything happens.
Yeah, there's so much information now in the modern world that it's a lot to expect. I mean, I understand it's a lot to expect people to listen to my album at all, you know, because it's not music that immediately clicks. You have to listen to it 3, 4, 5 times to begin to, you know, appreciate it, or not, the case may be, but to be able to make up your mind. So already I'm kind of struggling always with this diminishing attention span and the channel flipping mentality, you know. 30 seconds of that channel, 30 seconds of that song, 30 seconds of that song. So it's tough, you know, it's tough for people like me that make more kind of, think more in terms of albums than singles.
With that in the back of your mind, in what way do you apply that on certain songs, or is it just the album?
I don't. You mean what do I put the?
In keeping in mind the attention span of.
I don't apply it. I think in a way, if you're really a serious musician or a serious artist, without wanting to sound too pretentious, I think you have to completely disconnect from any thought for how what you're doing might be perceived by other people. The thing about art is that art is actually, by definition, quite a selfish act. It's quite a self-indulgent act. If you start thinking about art, if you start thinking about making your art to cater for the market or to please other people, you stop being an artist, you become an entertainer. I'm not saying it's not possible to be both, but I think the moment you start thinking of yourself as an entertainer, you start to create your art to please other people and not yourself. And I don't believe that's what artists do.
Have you ever become an entertainer without knowing?
Yeah, in the early part of my career I allowed myself to be talked into doing things by record companies that I didn't believe in, wasn't very proud of, and really regretted. And I'll tell you, there's only one thing worse than becoming successful with something you don't believe in, and that's failing with something you don't believe in. If you've released something that you really don't feel good about and it's still a failure, you think to yourself, I should have just done what I wanted to do, you know, and it would have failed and at least I would have still been proud of it, you know. But so I think in the early part of my career I did a few times do things that didn't believe in, and they weren't successful, and I just felt so bad that I'd allowed myself to compromise and still failed. So I think I had, very early on in my career, I had this kind of moment where I said, that's it, no more. I'm just going to do what I want to do. If it fails, at least I'm proud of it. At least I did it for me and I'm pleased with it. And it was actually ironically at that time that I started to build a fan base, because you know, sometimes you can play too much to the lowest common denominator and you don't give people credit. There's a lot of people out there that do appreciate quality and do appreciate some intellect behind music and art. And so I began to realise that the more self-indulgent I was in a way, the more people kind of admired that in me. And you know, it's not been easy, but over 20 years I've built up an audience that do respect, I guess, the fact that I don't do things for the wrong reasons. I do things for very selfish reasons, really. If I'm going to release a record, I've got to basically be the one that would buy it first of all. I'd be the first in the queue to buy it. That's my criteria. Yeah.